Welcome back. Wildlings, Colin here, the Wild CEO. And my whiteboard says it all. Is carnivore good or bad? Is the carnivore diet good or bad? But guess what you can also do? Is you can also change this and make this, so is carnivore good or bad? Is meat eating good or bad? And should you include animals in your diet, no matter what diet you are following? I'm gonna cover that and more in today's video, so stick around. Now, before we get into number one, keep in mind that this video could be an hour long or more if I were to go into each of the rabbit holes that pertain to whether meat is a health food or not. I'm going to give you a brief overview of these rabbit holes that you can then go down on your own in your own time. If you want, you can also see some of the videos I recommend linked below as to the answer to this and many of the questions relating to whether meat is a health food or not. So let's get into number one with that disclaimer in mind. And the first thing is there has not been a single controlled study ever done that connects meat to cancer or heart disease or any of these other modern Western diseases. Not one single controlled study.
Oh my God, how can that be the case?
When everyone who talks about the plant-based agenda and anyone that likes to demonize meat or even fat for that matter, they say,
research shows.
Well, guess what? Research that they're referring to is actually just polling. I'm pausing here for effect. What that means is they send you a questionnaire in the mail, and then they ask you questions like, how many cups of ribs have you eaten in the past 55 weeks or the past year? That's a literal question that is on a food questionnaire, and they will ask you a series of these relating to your entire diet and everything you eat. And then they try to look at that data, and they try to make all these connections and assumptions and correlations, and then that
Research
is used to make bold claims, and the media picks it up and makes bold claims about
meat connected to this, and meat does that, and this and that, and low fat is better, and blah, blah, blah.
It's literally wrong.
Epidemiological research, when you really go into it and you look at it, and you look at the methods used, and you look at the connections they try to make when they interpret the data, you see a ton of human error and a ton of human bias and human dogma. Most researchers will find exactly what they want. What's funny is you have all this research done this way to connect meat to being bad for you. Yet where are the studies done that connect sugar consumption or grain consumption? Where are those studies? Who's funding them? Obviously not big food companies.
I can tell the public what to think, and I can use these surveys and these questions, and then I can interpret them in whatever way I want to whatever end. And I will take that money that Monsanto and the big food companies are paying, and I will just deposit that into my IRA so that I don't get taxes.
You have to ignore epidemiological research. That's just what it comes down to. There is some use in certain epidemiological research, and sometimes epidemiological research can be beneficial when you can look at what's not there or what is not showing in the data, right? You can kind of do a reverse correlation, but again, it's still a correlation. So the number one thing we have to get out of the way right now is the fact that there is not a bunch of research that proves causation, and there's not been controlled studies where they actually control for variables and they test different outcomes, and et cetera, because that would be very expensive and we can't really lock humans in a cage to actually do that. So there's a lot of hurdles to doing that in human research, right? There's not one single controlled study that way. The way you might test for a drug, for example, it's not being done with meat or food or anything. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to do some of these. But again, who's funding the study? What outcome are they trying to find? Because generally research is going to match what the researchers are trying to find, and or it's going to reflect the bias and the dogma and the preconceived ideas that the researchers, the scientists, actually have ahead of time. There's too much human error. Therefore, you can throw out all that epidemiological research, and it does not prove causation, and it does not connect meat to cancer or heart disease. Then there's research that is actually useful. Carbon dating, fossil record, archaeological, paleontology, evolutionary biology even, evolutionary psychology, anthropology, observing modern day hunter-gatherers and observing hunter-gatherers over the past 500 years, humans that live in the wild that have never been touched by technology or food supply or anything, looking at the foods they eat, looking at the frequencies that they eat these foods, looking how they prepare these foods, and then asking ourselves, well, they don't eat refined sugar, they don't eat refined grains, they don't eat any of these industrialized foods. Maybe that's why.
Nah, we'll just ignore that.
Give me time. I'm trying to make my handwriting look good, so I have to go really, really slow. Millions. M-I-L-L-I-O-N-S. And there you have it. Millions of success stories now and for 200 plus years since we've been able to even print books. Did you know that the first diet book that kicked off the whole diet book craze was a book by a gentleman known as Banting? His last name was Banting, and so it eventually became, are you doing the Banting diet, or are you Banting? Became the kind of the word to describe this lower carb, cut out bread, right? Eat more animal products. And this guy was a heavy individual that couldn't lose weight no matter, he exercised daily, got very frustrated, went to all the doctors, etc., tried everything, and then eventually made the connection to eating wheat and grain-based products and sweets and removing those from his diet, losing the weight, and then he created the Banting diet pamphlet, and then it took off like crazy. And so what happened though, which is what happens anytime new anything comes out that the medical establishment or the experts didn't think up themselves, what did they do? They attacked him and they tried to discredit him and they tried to prove why his theory was the exact opposite of what you should do. Even though there was mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence showing individuals getting success following this diet. And this is exactly what happens today. You see, whether it's paleo, whether it's zone, whether it was even Atkins back in the day, and now with carnivore, and now with keto, as these diets pick up steam because people are getting actual results, the experts are going to come out with all these reasons why it's wrong, it's not the case, discredit, etc. And they so conveniently ignore the fact that millions of people get results following this or very similar recommendations. There is literally millions upon millions of data points. My life, people I've seen, people I've trained over the years, people on the internet, people on podcasts, people writing books about it, people on YouTube, the guy who wrote the first diet book back in the 1860, I think it was. Mountains and mountains and mountains of anecdotal evidence. But because it wasn't done in some lab and some dude in a white lab coat, the clipboard, somehow you ignore it. Somehow that has no validity. Well, guess what? This idea that you should go to the medical establishment or doctors for your health and lifestyle is a new trend that is a result of pharmaceutical lobbying, of the medical establishment itself, of marketing, and all these big powers that be that have convinced the public in our country that doctors know all be all, that are the best. And if you just read a recent book I read by Ken Berry, right there, you will see how this is literally, utterly, absurdly not the reality. Doctors and the medical establishment itself does not know what's best for humans. And there was a profit motive for them to not know. There's a profit motive to keep the pharmaceutical machine and the corrective surgery machine and all the procedures and blood tests and all these other things that healthy humans don't need. There's a profit incentive to keep people in that system. And it's a $1 trillion healthcare disaster that we have right now, with about 30% of our greenhouse emissions connected in some way to healthcare, which is something nobody talks about. They try to blame cow farts, but the reality is fat, sick Americans eating standard American diet of plant-based and grain foods is why we have that. Look at the success stories, try it for yourself, and when you get those results, when you invariably get those results, it might be hard. It will be hard. It will take time. You will have to eliminate certain things. You will have to give up certain things. You won't always be perfect, but if you get back on that wagon each time, you will eventually keep inching forward. And when that happens, you can ignore 99% of all of it because you've found the truth for yourself. And I can tell you right now, to save a lot of pain and heartache, it's not about calorie restriction. It's not about eating low fat. It's going to be high fat, high protein, or modulate the two. And it's going to be low carb, and it's going to be as little sugar as possible. And it's going to be cooking as real raw food as much as you can at home of the best ingredients you can find. That right there, that 15 seconds that I just shared with you, it could be 100 diet books. It could be 100 podcasts. It could be 100 YouTube videos. And I could charge you money to come see me on a monthly basis and all these things. Or you could just follow and do what I just told you to do and not worry about most of the other small things that people get hung up on. And you'll change your freaking life. That's literally what it comes down to. So that's number 2. Every part of almost every animal that is, I think humans can eat every animal for the most part. Obviously, there's ones that are poisonous. You can remove the poisonous part and you can still eat the other parts of the animal. Every part of the animal, aside from maybe the bones that are just not chewable because it's solid calcium or in whatever other things that make a bone. Every part inside the bones, the organs, the brains, the skin, everything is edible on an animal. Teeth, probably not. Teeth, fingernails, and bones. and maybe certain hair. Compare that to plants. About 99% of plants in nature, you can't even eat. It's not even edible for humans. And the ones that are edible require some form of processing or cooking or removal of hulls or seeds or whatever to make it edible. And then when it is edible, it does not carry complete nutrition necessary for the human animal. Yet you can eat an animal and get the entire spectrum of essential amino acids, essential fatty acids, and as far as I can tell, almost every vitamin and mineral. I'd have to look at this. I'd have to look at every single thing you can find. But like, for example, in a grass-fed cow, if you ate the whole cow, nose to tail, etc., and that's all you ate the rest of your life, you would never need to eat anything else. You can't say that for any plant. You just can't. And you might be able to say that for certain animals, like something like a rabbit that's very lean, you could starve to death. There's certain reasons for that. It's known as rabbit starvation. But any animal that isn't super lean like that, and even if it is super lean, if you're eating the organs and everything, you might be able to. But rabbits might be that weird exception. But you get all of the nutrition that your body needs when you consume animals. And when you consume plants, you get a fraction of what your body needs. So imagine trying to feed 40 wild humans. You're a band, you're a tribe, you wander together, you hunt together, you sleep together, you build fires together, you travel together, and you're gonna try to feed every single person, the baby, the pregnant moms, the grandparents, everyone. You think you're gonna be able to do that with less than 1% of the plants you find in the wild? And even those ones you do find, you have to process and cook and do all these things? Or the animal that you just killed, you can literally eat raw and feed the entire tribe. And in a lot of cases, one animal can feed the entire tribe for a day, multiple days, sometimes even weeks if you're slaughtering a huge like mammoth, for example, or like a giant anteater or something. Because I consider this solved at this point. I don't know why I even have to keep going into this, because to me, this is just, it's a no-brainer. There's so much evidence there. You can't say that plants are ideal for humans, or that was even the bulk of their diet. And some people try to do this. I've seen a lot of really biased dogmatic articles coming out about saying basically our ancestors were mostly vegetarian and crap like that. That's a recent article that came out. And what I sense is going on is there's more pressure on these food companies and whatever to reverse and stall some of the trend that is happening in paleo and keto and real food and et cetera. I think there's some powers that be trying to prevent that change. It's really discerning. But the reality is that that article tried citing like Australopithecus and other ape-like descendants that might have been ancestors, but millions and millions of years ago, and then completely ignore the fact that Homo sapiens evolved about 200 to 300,000 years ago, and that's who we are today. They tried going back to ancestors that didn't survive. Neanderthals, they also cite Neanderthals. Guess what? Neanderthals died out. Homo sapiens are the evolutionary winners. And a lot of the people that theorize as to why that happened was because of our language. We basically outmatched the Neanderthals. We were more able to work together. We probably could hunt together, and a lot of people think that we basically hunted Neanderthals out and they went extinct. So how are you going to cite Australopithecus, which is what an old, like kind of like an ape pre-hominid species that died out? A lot of people blame climate change for that when that happened. They couldn't adapt enough to the changing food supply. Yeah, exactly. Because then Homo erectus comes along, and Homo erectus is a pretty good scavenger, but by no means a good hunter. And then they die out, and it eventually paves the way for Homo sapiens. Or maybe concurrently, right? We don't really know exactly what the timelines were on all of these things, but it's kind of like a progression where some species would have been alive at the same time, some would have dominated and moved on, and some would have died off. And Homo erectus was one of our forebears, one of our ancestors that died off, that paved the way for Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens, the reason we got that name is because of our big brains. It's known as wise man. Be very weary of anybody that tries making a statement about humans eating plants.
Or humans should be eating plants. Or plants are the best, or the healthiest, or we've eaten plants the most, or whatever. All of that
is null. All of that is void. All of it is wrong. All of it is inaccurate. All of it is bollocks. All of it is nonsense. I consider it solved at this point. But it is number 3, to understand whether a diet based on carnivore, based on animal foods is going to be good for you, okay for you, whatever. You need to understand the science and the theory behind all of these things, because then you can understand how people misinterpret it and misuse it. It's a combination of either of those. People, they have bias. They want to believe something like plants are best. And so they will ignore the data that disproves that, and they will focus on data that might support it or that might be inconclusive. And that's pretty much what everyone's doing if they're trying to make the connection that plants are the best for humans. Plants can be good for humans in very strategic ways, and they are a backup source of food. They are not the primary food. Humans are primarily carnivores, is what it is. Number 4, anti-nutrients. Anti-nutrients. One of those things that people love to just gloss over and ignore. But the fact is, every single plant in the plant kingdom has natural pesticides. A lot of them have oxalates. Some of them have phytates. Nuts, seeds, plants, grains, gluten you've heard of, lectins. All of these things in these plants are the way that this species defends itself in nature. Every species that has been able to be alive to even the past 10,000 years, when we'd be able to take over, control them, grow them, whatever, they are only alive because they were able to develop a natural defense and an evolutionary strategy around that defense to allow them to survive. Plants don't like to be eaten. Humans don't like to be eaten. Animals don't like to be eaten. So we all have our own strategies. Now let's compare plants to animals real quick. What is something about plants and animals that's uniquely different? Well, plants can't move. They don't have arms and legs. They don't have teeth. They can't really hide. Animals, on the other hand, run away, hide, use defense mechanisms like spines or in their shell or scent, strong scent or venom, etc. Plants can't move, so their defense mechanism is to be very good at chemistry, meaning they build up things inside of their structure that cause negative effects in animals that eat them, primarily insects, right? So if you think about a plant and it creates these natural pesticides that in some cases will kill an insect immediately. If an insect is crawling on you and you're Mr. Leaf, right? An insect is crawling on you and it's going to basically eat your entire leaf off, the entire plant, if allowed. Well, even if that insect comes through and takes a couple bites, if you kill it before it eats the whole leaf or the whole plant, you will survive. These small doses of toxin can kill certain species. For humans, we can consume them, but there are still negative effects. And if you take something like gluten, for example, which has been thoroughly studied to be linked to leaky gut and other autoimmune issues, well, greens have these, nuts and seeds have these. Everything in the plant kingdom, to some form or the other, has some kind of natural pesticide that attacks the human biology in an adverse way. This is undisputable. The only thing people try to dispute is how bad it is and whether it can actually be a beneficial hormetic stressor. If you look at some of the data on this, though, that's probably a very weak statement. Furthermore, if you look at the people that have autoimmune, for example, and they eat something like even a few olives, like in the case of Michaela Peterson, who was on the Ancestral Mind podcast, she ate a few olives and it flared up her symptoms of arthritis, back pain, depression for 21 straight days. She can only eat ruminants, so grass-fed beef primarily, and salt. Everything else attacks her biology because she is so sensitive to these things in these plants. Now, not everyone's going to be as sensitive as Michaela, yes, but to what level are all humans sensitive? And I would postulate that humans are all sensitive and that it does affect all of us. We just don't know to what extent. But if you look at people doing carnivore and you look at even I would say it's probably millions at this point, of people that are doing an animal-based diet and that feel great, that look great, that are losing weight, that can sleep, that can improve their sex life, that improve everything. Well, a lot of them are doing little to no plant products. That should tell you something. I think plants can be used as flavoring. I think plants can be used as a supplement to the diet. And I think certain plants are better than others because every plant's going to have a different level of these anti-nutrients. And I think your own biology and lifestyle preference, etc., can allow for certain plants, and it's going to be different for everybody. But the universal thing that I want people to understand, especially to answer the question of today's video of is carnivore or a meat-based diet good or bad for you, is to understand that animals, because they're mobile, did not have to evolutionarily produce things inside their body to defend themselves. So when you eat animal food, it's literally pure nutrition. I think there's almost no anti-nutrients in meat. Like, think about that for a second. In plants, there's countless. There's thousands of compounds we don't even understand and how they affect us. Animals, on the one hand, no anti-nutrients, pure nutrition, every essential amino acid and fatty acid and vitamin and mineral you need as a human. Plant kingdom, lacking in all these things, not bioavailable, barely enough protein, definitely missing fatty acids, definitely missing certain B vitamins and things like that. It's like, how do people in the right mind, how can they somehow tell you that
Plants are the best optimal human food.
when it's so obvious that animals are the optimal human food? Humans are primarily carnivores. This is just a first principle. The more I talk about this, the more I create videos about this, the more I'm just like, oh my gosh, even I was sucked into the dogma for years. Again, certain plants, and also I don't consider mushrooms to be in this family. If you actually looked at fungi and mushrooms, it's its own separate class of species that's closer to animals than it is to plants. So that's a topic for another day. But I'm talking about specifically plants, especially grains and greens and things like that. There's levels of every one, but the fact of the matter is animals are optimal human food, good in pretty much every single way. Plants are lacking in every single way. And this is undisputable. Anybody that tries telling you that's not the case is ignoring like basic laws of chemistry and biology that are easily disputed with like an 8th grade chemistry book. Let's recap, and then I'm gonna let you go. Get on with your life. Get off the processed foods, get off the sugar, get off the grains, and eat more animal products, hopefully. So number one, not a single controlled study. Plenty of observational data, plenty of epidemiological research, which isn't really research, we've already established that. 2, millions of success stories, and this is, you could be the next one. Try it on yourself. You don't need the medical establishment to give you permission. Granted, if you're on drugs or something like that, and it's going to conflict with what you're doing, consult your doctor. And if you do go to a doctor regularly, consult your doctor. You should always do that when you're making any changes in your diet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Number 3, every part of an animal is consumable and provides human nutrition. Plants provide almost little to no human nutrition. And the nutrition that is found, whether it's protein or certain vitamins or whatever, are lacking. They're never complete. And in a lot of cases, they're not bioavailable, meaning your body can't even use them. Number 4, anti-nutrients found in the plant kingdom, not found in animals. Need I say more? That's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, bell sign, do all that stuff. Slap it, like it, hit it, drop it, dump it, whatever. Do something. So I see you in the next one. And if you have questions or comments, drop them below. Let me know if you have any questions on the carnivore diet or the animal-based diet, or if you have an experience, if you're one of these millions of success stories, if you're one of these millions, drop it below, share your experience. Let me know if there's anything I didn't cover in today's video that you want me to uncover more, unpack more. I'm glad to do it. And I will see you in the next video.